Okay, the next thing that I'm going to do is bring in some images into my page here. So I'm going to go to File, Place, and I will start to bring these in. These are from an undergraduate sketching class. Open and hold down the mouse, and I'm just going to place them in here for now. A few of them I'm going to bring in a slightly different way, but there are 4 images that I'm going to bring in just the way I just did this one to show you the difference. Let's bring in this one. Oops. Yeah, I want to bring it in as a separate one. So I'm going to deselect and place. And I'll move these around once I get them in here. Okay, so some content you want to upload directly to the page. Again, the whole idea with the master pages or the parent pages is that anything that's in that parent will appear on the page that it is assigned to. But for example, I want to have some text here that is totally separate from the parent. So I'm going to go ahead and click and create a text box right here. And then what I'm going to do is go find some text that I'd like to include in here, and I will paste it in. So that text, I'm going to add some additional text here. This is the course description. Right, now you may be taking the syllabi and uploading those as images or cutting and pasting from a PDF, depending on how they were generated. All right, and I'm going to bring in some outcomes also from the syllabus. And okay, so again, you may have slightly different text here and additional text that I'm not showing. So I'm going to click in there in Control A. I'm going to go to Properties, and I'm going to change my text style to Century Gothic, and I'm going to remove the bold, and we'll see how that looks. You're of course going to choose the text that you prefer, or the font that you prefer. Okay, so I've got these 4 images in here, and now what I'm going to do is bring in the other 3. But I'm going to, so when you bring these images, this blue box represents the frame. So it automatically is assigned to this image that you bring in, but you could generate the frames first and then bring the images. The advantage of doing that is maybe you can kind of set the alignments that you're looking for prior to bringing them in the file. So to create a frame, I'll just to show you an example, click here, and you can click on 2 points. All right, so there's a frame that I could assign an image to. I'm also going to show you, again, and this is where perhaps the layout tools within InDesign are really beneficial. I'm going to click on that frame tool, and I'm going to start my frame up here at the upper left. Oops, let's do that again. I'm going to hold it down. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to hit the arrow keys, 1, 2, so that I'm creating 3 equally spaced frames all at the same time. Oops, create another one. I'm going to delete that. Okay, so now I can place additional images. So I'll bring in some of these peppers, and they'll place them directly in one of the frames. As you can see, it brought it in and it kind of zoomed to a much larger size than the frame. So one thing that I can do while I'm still on this frame is go to Object, Fitting, and Fill Frame Proportionally. Okay, now I still may make some revisions to what we see here, but for the time being, I'm just going to leave it like that. Okay, now I'm going to bring in another, I'm going to place another one of those peppers. Let's bring in the green one. And again, I'm going to go to Object, Fitting, and, just so I have something to work with there. And I'll bring in one more. The red one, open, click, and I will repeat that process of fitting it in the frame. Okay, so some initial thoughts. I may want to, zoom out a little bit with this one. I may want to sort of shift this one within the frame. So there are a few ways of editing these frames. If I double click on the image, a brown box comes up and I can sort of move something from there. The frame is going to remain, but what part of the image you see will change. Okay, so now, now I don't have all that white space on the bottom. You click on this here, and again, I can shift the image within that frame. Now, these are relatively square, so I may want to leave it how it was, but you may find that you have, images that you're okay with cropping a certain portion of them. And so this is the method you would do to change that. Now, I don't want to do that with this one because, as you can see, I'm getting these white bands on the edges. So I'm going to Control Z to take it back to how it was. But anyway, if you click on them once, you're going to get some frame manipulation tools. If you double click, now you're editing the image inside the frame. So for this one, I'm going to drag this down a little bit. So I see the stem and maybe the top of the frame. And I'm going to do that again, shift it over to the right. There we go. So I may be cropping some of the bottom, but I think that's a little bit better composed in the view there. Now, it's a little bit unrelated to this whole business about working with the images. It's just the choice of the layout. There's an infinite number of possibilities for how you could lay these out. And, how you do it will really depend on the content that you're trying to show. My thought with this one was that I would try to group certain kinds of things. So that's why the peppers are sort of stacked in a row. And then the images here on the right, these are kind of all architectural subjects. So I might try to keep those in the same place. And then this one is a little bit of the oddball. So, we'll see where it can go. So, I had created these guidelines, and basically my thought is that I will try to respect them, but I can't let those grids just override everything. I need to make choices based on what I want to show, what I'd like to highlight or give some kind of hierarchy to. And also just, the proportions of a lot of the images don't really work with some set module. So you need to, use some kind of flexibility. On some of the pages, I may be more respectful of this center alignment. Maybe I'll put certain kinds of images on the left and others on the right. But basically, those guidelines are just a kind of loose structure that you can modify as needed. So looking at these images that I have here, I think I'd like to make this image slightly bigger than the others, maybe this one, depending on how much space is left. But I'll just go ahead and start moving things around. I'm going to click on this and push it up here to the top, maybe here. I'll take this one and move it over here, and I'll push this one all the way to the lower right corner. So I had set for my margins 20.25 for the sides and a slightly larger margin for the bottom. Let me move this one out of the way for the time being. Now I'm going to click on this frame and I am going to do that again. I want to see the blue because I want to drag the frame. I'm going to click on it and I'm going to pull it. Now you can see that I can alter the proportions of that frame. And if I hold down the Shift key, I'm going to constrain the proportions. Okay, now as you can see, the image did not adjust in size to the frame. So I'm going to Control Z, and this time I'm going to hold down Shift, but also Control. And that will allow the image to get larger in addition to the frame. Right now, one thing I wanted to mention is that, you may bring in some images and find that they're kind of fuzzy, and that has to do with the display options. So InDesign is basically giving you some options for how much detail you want to see as you're working. Maybe I don't need all the detail all of the time, as a means of kind of making the file work a little bit faster. So if I go to View, Display Performance, I have a few options. I can hit Fast Display, and it's basically just going to give me, these rectangles that I can use as I'm kind of going through the layout process. I can also go to Typical, which is how they came in. But if I really want to see how they're going to look when I print, I can go to High Quality. And if I zoom in, you should see that they're not quite as pixelated. So as you're working, you probably want to keep it at the typical display or maybe the even lesser one. All right, now I'm going to continue to move some of these images. And I may not completely observe the grid lines, but I will try at some point to sort of make the spaces between them perhaps the same. So I just want to kind of get a rough idea. Oops, I didn't hold down Control and Shift at the same time. Okay, so that one's bigger now. And I'll do the same thing with this one. Let's bring that up a little bit. And this one, as I mentioned, is going to be a bit of oddball. So I may place it in here and then make some changes to it, to the whole composition. Now, I'm okay with having these areas of white space on a page. I don't think you need to completely fill things. It gives the eye a little bit of opportunity to rest, but it takes a little bit of fussing around with these images and these layouts to kind of get them to look compositionally balanced in the way that you want. So,